Want to record? All right, welcome all to tonight's team manager training called Getting Your Team to Wow. My name is Chrissy Burr. I am an alum, and this is year 30 for me in the program. So I'm really excited to have you all here tonight. As you just heard, we are recording this session. So a few things we'd like to get to know you. We're recording it live and we will be pausing periodically for questions. But if you do have questions as we go, we can feel free to work them in the chat too. But if we can have you in the chat, put your name, your pronouns, where you're from, what challenge you're doing. It's okay if you're undecided, and how many years you've been a team manager. That would be great. We're not going to take time for introductions, but we'd still like to know a little bit more about you all as we go through the training tonight. Some ground rules: stay muted unless you're speaking. You can have your camera on or off, your choice. And if you do have questions, you can put it in the chat. You can raise your hand if you do have a question, and then when we do pause, we'll give time for questions. And please, no question is bad or idea is bad, so please think about it. If you've got a question, recommend you put it in the chat so that you don't forget, and then when we pause the recording, we can talk through those. So as I said, I'm Chrissy Burr. This is just some pictures of me and my team and me as a volunteer. I love this program. This is really fun for me. We've been doing some brand new team manager training. So if you are a new team manager, I encourage you all to go watch our crash course team manager training. This is not going to cover the basics. This kind of assumes that you have a base of you've done DI, you understand the tournament experience, and we're walking through, and we're going to dive into some abstract concepts tonight. If you are new though, feel free to watch as well, ask questions, and we're happy to have you here. So tonight's training, we are going to dive into some terms that we talk a lot about in DI that are a little bit abstract in concept. So we're going to talk about, what does WOW mean? What is the definition of WOW? Because if your team's going to get to WOW, we should have a common definition of that. We're also going to talk about what the definition of creativity is. Now, these are not only definitions of creativity, but just some things to think about. And then we're going to take those definitions and build on some practical things that you can do as a team manager to help get your team to WOW, including a really fun activity called Good, Better, WOW that you can take back and do with your teams as something hands-on. So we're going to get started here and dive right in. Thank you guys so much. We never have a shortage of kids that want to be on DI teams. Usually the limiting factor is team managers. So we want to say thank you for that. We know you've got a tough job. It's a very rewarding job, but it can be challenging at times. So we are very thankful that you are here tonight, and thank you for the work that you're doing with your kids to make sure that they have a great DI experience. So how do you define WOW, right? It's kind of one of those things that you just are like, wow, you just kind of know. But how do we think about quantifying that? One way to think about WOW is that a WOW moment it creates a transformational moment. It's something that makes you pause and transform something there. It makes you have an emotional moment that stays with you. If something is wow, it makes you smile. You might be scared, you might laugh, but there's some emotional reaction to a wow. So we're not going to interact here, but I want you all to just kind of think about that, right? What are some examples of an emotional moment that's happened, good or bad, that's made you go, wow? Maybe it was the first time you went on a roller coaster. I remember I was 9. It was at Valley Fair. It was the corkscrew. Still remember that moment. Love roller coasters to this day. The first time you saw a painting by your favorite artist. I kid you not, I shed tears of utter joy the first time I saw a Monet painting at the Art Institute in Chicago. Surprised me, did not expect it, but I was literally crying. I was that moved. The first time you saw a specific play, or maybe on the flip side, a tragedy that's happened that made you go wow and really stay with you, or something that you witnessed. A wow is something that by having that emotional moment, it really makes that stay with you, right? Because it's interactions and experiences that cause us to have that wow. It also makes a connection with people that's remembered for years. Wow things. I mean, there's things obviously that are passing that make you go wow, but those really pivotal things that are absolutely wow, you do remember. In terms of DI, I've been appraising for 21 years now. I still remember wow teams I saw 20 years ago. They were that awesome. And as an appraiser and as a scorer, if I'm going to give wow scores, or I'm going to give a special award, or I'm going to think about something, I ask myself, is this something that I'm going to remember a year from now? Is this something that I'm going to remember 5 years from now? And those wow teams have legitimately made that much of a connection that years later, I still think about it and I still talk about it. So, what are some examples of things that are wow that we have in daily life, right? That you can kind of talk to your kids about? Think about advertising in hook lines, right? Like maybe not a wow in your first sense of the word, but if you say got milk, people remember it. I know I, even before the musical Hamilton came out, could have told you that Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton in a famous duel because of that got milk commercial. Those of you that are my age or older will probably remember that. Nike, just do it. America runs on Duncan. Hook lines, slogans, things that are just like catchy that stick with you are part of that kind of wow factor. Certain characters. Here I've got just a kind of a smattering of iconic characters. Whether the actor did something very specific with that role that made you go wow and remember it, or the writers or the animators. These are characters that you see a picture of and you just remember their inner, you remember them. You either love them or you hate them, but they are characters that stick with you. And so as you're talking with your teams and you're talking about wow characters and wow character development, you can bring some of these examples up. I mean, some of these are probably on the older end that your kids may not remember, but like Darth Vader, been around for a long time. Bet you a lot of your kids still know who that is. Or Mario. Things, and what makes them so special or cool or scary, or what makes that character and those things stick with you. Because right, if we want to start thinking about wow and defining things, examples are really good to think about and to really kind of break that down. Paintings. Here are some very famous world paintings. What about these paintings were wow? Was it because it was a different style than somebody had ever seen before? Was it because the quality of what was being done was just so iconic that it stuck and has stood the test of time? So if you pick something that really makes you gravitate towards it, or something that is transformational here, some things to think about there as well. Fashion. I have a costume design degree, so this is always near and dear to me. You may not think about it, but fashion has wow moments. Dior's new look on the left-hand side was a huge transformation in fashion. That came out of the 1940s with very minimalistic post-war silhouettes. Not a lot of volume. Everything was really simple. And Dior threw this silhouette out, and it was just shocking. You look at it now and you wouldn't think about it, but it was. And it made people go, wow. The mini skirt. My dad still tells me the first time my dad was in the military and he was in Turkey and the Philippines. And he stepped off a plane in London when the mini skirt was out, and nobody saw legs like that in that much skin. And he still talks about that wow moment. The right-hand side, the hoop skirt. That was a wow moment in fashion history, because before then, they just kept adding really heavy petticoats and layers and layers and layers of things, right? So when somebody invented this cage that could go under there and do the same thing that was lightweight and a lot more comfortable for a woman to wear, That was a wow moment in fashion history. So it can be something visually shocking. It can be an innovative wow. It's just things that happen. And if you use examples about that, that's what we're kind of looking for your teams and your presentations. If you want to get those wow scores, it's just something that makes you pause to the unexpected. And I think one of the big things about a wow is that you just have to tell someone. Think about things that you just had to tell somebody about. Maybe it was a really great new restaurant or a new food that you tried, or that work of art, something, a new product, gadget that you purchased that just was really awesome, or a new episode or a play or a TV show that you just can't stop talking about. Think about those things and then ask what we all love to ask in DI, why? Why could you not stop talking about it? Those are those wow experiences and those wow things. So if you want to get your team to wow, you want to know what wow is. And taking some time to talk about wow with your kids so that they kind of have a goal in mind for how to get to wow is one of the best things that you can do. So these are just some practical examples that you can walk through your team to all get that common definition of wow. It's also important to think about appropriateness. I don't mean appropriateness in the sense that we think your DI kids are going to be improper or use bad language or poor judgment. I mean in terms of, specifically for DI, think about your audience, right? Your appraisers that are putting down scores. They're going to be adults. They might not be from where you live. So when thinking about wow, we want something that kind of transcends any sort of, you have to have a specific reference point, you have to have insider knowledge, you have to get it when they watch it. Those wow moments don't require any external knowledge or thought. You can watch it, you can see it for what it is, and that's all you need to know. Sometimes with teams, and I will give an example of my DI team when I was in high school, and I was on very successful teams. My team won globals twice in high school. But our junior year, we wrote a story about male and female perspectives of the same situation. It was so complicated that nobody understood it. And we did not score well on our story because it just went over everybody's heads and it was confusing. Because we didn't really think about the fact that it was you get one shot, this is what you're doing, these are who our audience members are, and they don't need, they didn't watch it 5 times, they don't have the inside jokes, and it just didn't land. So think about that too as you're coming up with your solutions to make sure that what you're doing is going to resonate with a lot of different people to make it that wow. You want to pause, Michaela? Go for it, Michaela. All right. So that was kind of a base definition of wow. Like I said, not the only way to define wow, but hopefully some things that you can think about to help understand what you're after for wow. So now let's go after another subject that we in DI like to talk a whole lot about. What is creativity? Another really abstract concept, here. So again, like, why is creativity so hard? It's kind of like wow, right? It's an abstract concept. There's many definitions. There's no right or wrong way. Whatever, what I think and what Anne thinks, what Michaela thinks could be very different as far as what's creative. And oftentimes, kind of like with wow, there's just kind of an implied meaning and you just know what it is. But it's really hard, right? If you're a team member trying to say, let's make a really creative solution, but you don't really know how to define that. So you don't have a goal in mind about what something is that's creative. So I'm going to share, this is a definition that I got off of a training I attended from Johnny Wells, who's the director of education for DI, and kind of his definition of creativity, but I thought it was a really good one. Why is it important? That common language, like we talked about. Now is a great time as you're meeting with teams to just kind of talk about what this means and what this means to your team. To use intentional language and encourage your kids to do the same, and to just really kind of walk through that. So these are 5 things that I like to think about when I'm thinking about if something is creative or not. And we're going to break each of these down. If something is creative, it is productive. It's characterized by expression. It's imaginative, extends beyond natural limits, and it causes something to come into existence. So we want something to be produced as part of this process, right? Just because there's something physically there doesn't mean that the team is producing. So this comes in terms of score. Think about if anybody's doing any sort of technical challenges or engineering challenges or anything that you're being scored on, like technical innovation or technical design. We only are looking at what the kids produce themselves, right? So if they just went and bought a costume, that's not going to be as creative as if they produced a costume from scratch, or produced a costume by pulling lots of different items, maybe that are already existing, and putting them together in another way. So think about how are they producing something versus just picking something so that they have something there. It's characterized by expression. We want to see your kids in their solution. It should feel like them. It should have personality. It should have feeling. It should be whimsical. It should be fun. It could be tragic. I've seen some really amazing skits in DI that are actually not super light and fun. There's some serious notes in the nature too, but it's the team injecting themselves into it and really truly creating a solution that's theirs. So as a team manager and as a team, do you see them in a solution? Do you see the group as a whole? How are your individual team members being represented? And how are they expressing themselves in their solution? Solutions that are just regurgitating something else or something that they've seen before that's very cookie cutter are not those solutions that we think as appraisers are really creative or are going to be wow. When the kids get their own quirks and funniness and themselves in there, that's when we start to think something is really creative. Imaginative. So an individual has the ability to create a mental picture of their very own. Like, is it something that, like I said, are they regurgitating something, or are they coming up with something really novel and unique, or taking lots of different ideas and turning them into something new to be distinctly their own? So picking a fairy tale that exists and just telling that story again is not going to be as creative as somebody that comes up with something else. Picking, so that's kind of what we want to think about is, have you heard of it before? And if you do tell a fairy tale, how is yours different than the original? What did your team do to bring something into life to make it new and imagine that, in using their imagination as part of that process? Extends beyond natural limits. We want your kids to push themselves. We don't want them to play it safe. We want them to go beyond what they know that they can do. Because when they push themselves beyond the safe zone, that's when the really good stuff comes out. And that's going to be different for everybody, right? And you can look at this in terms of, I have a goal, we want to go to globals and we want to do well and we want hardware. Or you can look at this as, we just want our kids to be the best that they can be and as creative as they can be, and the scores don't matter. So don't feel like this is only valuable if you're really with a competitive team. So in order to kind of know what their natural limits are, you kind of need that baseline. What skills do they already have? What are they bringing to the team at the start? What skills are they going to learn as part of this DI experience and grow? And as a team manager, encourage them to not just do the easy solution or the first thing that comes to mind. Now, you're not going to tell them what to do because that would be interference, but you're going to encourage them to keep going. If they decide on something really fast and just want to move on, you're going to pause and push them and encourage them to think about some other options and how they might go a little bit further in whatever they're doing. And we want ideally something to come into existence. We want something to be there that wasn't there before. That is your true creativity, right? And it doesn't have to be like completely everything brand new that's never existed, but how are they going to make it unique? And how are they going to make it their own? And what can they do that leaves that impression of something really, truly new that the appraisers have never seen before? I'm going to pause for questions again. All right. So how do I get my team to wow? How do you as a team manager help through this process? So you're going to spend some time, you're going to talk about your definition of wow. You're going to spend some time and you're going to talk about your definition of creativity. So you have some goals in mind. And then there's some other things that you can do that really are going to help them get there. One of the best things that you can do is to teach your kids to be fluent and flexible thinkers, right? We want them to learn how to do this and be good for this. This is going to help them get to wow and get creative, but it's also going to help them as they're coming up with ideas for everything. When we talk about fluency, we mean how do they come up with lots and lots of ideas? Fluency and idea generation is absolutely a skill, and it's not something that everybody's going to be good at day one. But the better your kids get at fluency and idea generation, the easier it's going to be for them when they're brainstorming challenge solutions, when they're coming up with ideas for an instant challenge, when they're doing anything, right? Just like everything in DI, we talk about the creative process and we talk about the journey and we talk about skill building. Fluency is that skill. So to start out right now, we want you to just get them used to coming up with ideas. Every team meeting, we're going to share some handouts, and I've got a whole list of sample fluency builders that you can start with, but just simple. Start. Name things that are red. Name 6 characters. Name things you see in the room, like just things to get them thinking and rapid progression. When we're talking about fluency, we don't care about quality. We care about quantity because we just want them getting used to lots and lots of things. When we talk about idea generation, you're going to start and they're going to come up with lots and lots of ideas. And they're all going to be real common. The good stuff isn't going to come out right away. And so that's why you need to get them good at this and fast at this, because they're going to get to create a lot faster. And as a team manager, I encourage you all to be okay with silence and to not just stop. A lot of times we see teams, okay, we're going to generate ideas for a few minutes and they come up with it. And the minute that they stop rapidly adding things, we want to just be done, right? Because silence is awkward, makes people uncomfortable. So as a team manager, you might want to interject, you might want to stop, you want to prompt. We want you to not do that. We want you to push through that silence and let them think, because then on the other side of that plateau is where your creative ideas are really going to start. So like I said, there's some idea generation. There's a lot of different ways that you can generate ideas. I really encourage you to go to the roadmap. There's a chapter in the roadmap that has lots of idea generation. You can do this just popcorn out loud. You can do this on Post-it notes. You can use lots of tools and things through there. get them used to generating ideas in lots of different ways. And, do this for instant challenge practice, do this for their team solutions. But the more they do it, then you can say, it's time for us to generate ideas. And they're going to know how to do that. And it's going to go a lot faster. And you're going to get a lot farther, a lot faster once they're comfortable with this process. We also want your kids to learn how to be flexible thinkers and to learn about thought shifts, and that it's okay to jump from one thing to another. Now, this is counteractive. A lot of times we encourage your kids to focus on one thing and not be all over the place. But when we're thinking about flexible thinkers, we want your kids to be all over the place, and we want them to learn how to do that, because that comes with that rapid idea generation and helps them flip to lots of different things at the same time. So you do this just like you do with your idea generation through practice. So some things that you can do. Have your kids name things that are red. Just have them name things that are red. And then give them a little bit more focused. Say, name things that are red on a playground. Spend 60 seconds on a playground. Then flip it. Things that are red in the kitchen. 60 seconds. Things that are red in a movie theater, at the bank, in a restaurant. Just get them going down that list and flipping and thought shifting. It's going to really help them not stay stuck in their ideas that way, giving them those extra props and shift there. So do it for 60 seconds or do it every other answer. Like, do round robin. You're going to name it on a playground. You're going to name it in the kitchen, in the movie theater. You can put these on note cards. Have them flip a note card over, name something that's red on that note card in whatever place they have. Name a character that exists in the above places. So you could come up with a lot of different locations and then have them name things and use those same set of starter cards through all of these activities. And that's just going to help them how they do that. And then once they get good at that, you can start thinking about thought shifts in the abstract. What are things that are red that aren't maybe physical objects? Love, greed, war, embarrassment, anger. Starting to think about things in a little different way to get more towards those creative ideas. The faster they get through the common stuff, the faster they get to the good stuff. And that only comes with practice. So you're going to have flexible, fluent thinkers. And what is another thing that's going to help your team get to wow? We want you to work to get them to the performance stage of teamwork. We want you to get them from me to we. This is in the roadmap as well. Stages of team development. Teamwork is a skill. It is a process. Your kids are not going to be great at this day one. So this is something that you as a team manager are going to want to work through with your kids, because once they get to that performing stage, it's going to be a lot easier to get your kids to wow versus when they're storming and arguing and fighting and, not really working through things. It's going to be hard, right? That's the point. You're just happy they come up with something and have a solution, which is totally fine. So as a team manager, and there's a lot of tips and tools that you can do this in the roadmap that we're not going to talk through tonight. But at the beginning, right, when they're forming, they're going to be reserved. They're going to be polite. This is where you're going to focus on just getting them to know one another, how to work together, what their strengths are, common definitions for things, trying to decide what their goals are as a team. All of that stuff is really great. Then your storming stage, as they get a little bit more comfortable, they may be competitive, they may be arguing, they're focusing on themselves. This is where structure is important, using those idea generating and focusing tools, walking through those things, and a great time for you as a team manager to introduce some of these activities. Then as they continue to work through that and learn how to generate ideas and focus and be fluent thinkers, they're going to move into the norming stage where they have acceptance, they have defined roles, they know how to work together, And that's when you can start thinking about the results and the plans and thinking about your wow. If you're in the forming and storming stages, that's going to probably be more of your focus. Once you get down to norming and performing is where you're going to be able to stretch them a little bit more. And so your goal is really that performing, that emerging team identity, and the results, the process, and the relationships. And then don't forget to celebrate at the end, right? Because no matter where they end up, they may only get to storming for the year. That's okay. You're still going to celebrate those accomplishments. They may be performing for one meeting and the next meeting they're storming, or even in the same meeting. That's okay too. Celebrate the things that they do and walk through that process. This is all learning. Those of us, I mean, everybody works with teams, right? Think about in your own life how hard it is sometimes to work and collaborate with other people. It's not easy. And so it's important skills that we're teaching them as part of this. All right, so those are some tools and some things that you can do. We're going to pause, see if we've got any questions. Another really important thing in DI, especially as you're getting your teams to wow and you're looking for those creative ideas, is to embrace failure. You want to make it a safe space to fail and teach your kids to fail quickly and learn from it to be better the next time. Creative and wow solutions are often not safe solutions. They're risky. They're not your normal thing. Your kids may fail. It may not be right the first time, and that's okay. That's part of the beauty of DI, is that it's a safe space to explore, to learn, to have something not work, and then move on from it. And, you know, fail quickly, fail often is way better. And as a team manager, you can help encourage that as well, right? You obviously don't want to discourage them or have a preconceived notion that they're not going to be successful with their ideas at the beginning. But you can encourage them to do things like prototyping, coming up with small, manageable chunks of things to see if something's going to work or not, so that they're not investing a month into a specific solution, right? Before you figure out if it's going to fail. It's going to be a lot easier if something is going to fail a week in than 4 weeks in, because then you have time to learn from it and grow. But the risk taking here and encouraging that is really important. And in fact, DI thinks it's so important. There's now scores about risk taking in the solutions, right? And so part of that risk taking could be failure, and thinking about, if something fails, what could we do to overcome that failure, right? During your team presentation or in rehearsals, and thinking about all of that. So talking through those what if scenarios as well as part of the failure is an important thing, especially if your kids are going to come up with a risky solution, to figure out what their plan B might be as well. We want them to get to wow to actually solve the challenge. This may sound silly, but it is really easy to get distracted with something that has no points, that isn't the point of what they're trying to do. That's really cool, but it isn't scored. As an appraiser, there have been so many times that I have seen teams come out with something that is just awesome. And then you look at their scoring sheet and it's not scored, or it's something that's worth 10 points. And it may be a wow, but we can't give them points for that. About the only thing that we could potentially do is give them a special award. So you want to make sure that while they're doing wow and cool things, those wow and cool things are actually what is in the challenge. And to do that, it's really important to nitpick and understand what's actually being scored in your challenges. So what does technical design versus technical innovation mean? How is that scored? How is that broken down? Clear and effective storytelling versus creativity and originality. Those are often very different things, right? One is, does it make sense? And one is that novelty that we talked about. It can be super cool and creative, But if the appraisers don't understand what's happening, the scores are going to be impacted. Integration. How does everything fit together? How did they make all of those seemingly disparate parts fit together? Theatrical effect, visual effectiveness, team choice elements, creativity versus quality and workmanship. Those are separate scores. Something can be super creative and not well made, or something can be super well made and not very creative. Your wow solutions are factoring both of those things in. Creative use of materials, risk-taking, effective use. Thinking about these things, making sure your kids understand what they mean is going to help them get there, right? Because if you don't understand, your kids aren't going to understand. And if your kids don't understand, they're not going to solve the challenge because they're not going to know what they're aiming for. So it's important. Your wow teams are teams that get this and spend time in the details. It's also important to set team goals. What are you trying to accomplish? It could be, we just want to have fun this year. Awesome. That's a great goal, right? We want to have have something for every single element on our, to present at our regional tournament. That's great. Your team may have a goal of, we want to win global finals. My team had that goal. I might add, we didn't get there to begin with, but I was on teams for 9 years. The first year I was on a team, we placed last at the regional or the sectional tournament. We were terrible. Our backdrop fell apart. Our box was too big. We had a great time, but our scores were really bad. But our goal was just to have fun. My 8th grade year, we went to globals. First time we'd ever been past a regional. We went to global finals. We placed 28th. We had a great time. But we sat at global finals that year and said, we're going to win globals next year. And we systematically broke it down and had a goal to win. And how we did that is we looked at the teams that were doing well and the teams that won and thought about the things that made us go, wow, that we saw from other teams. And we came back that next year, which was actually the first year of DI in 99-2000, and said, if we are going to win, we need a wow. What's our wow? Like, what is the thing that's going to be so cool that everybody's going to walk away and give us the, thinking and talking about it and giving us those big points? And so we did that wow. And then we made sure all of the other elements were there as well to have a full rounded solution. And we actually did win globals in 2000, which I know is not attainable for everybody, but we did that with a very specific goal in mind of, we want to win global finals. And we broke it down and we talked about it in every meeting. That was our goal. What's our wow? How are we going to win? And we were all aligned on that goal. Doesn't mean that has to be your goal, but it certainly helps if you have that goal and have a goal in mind and can walk through that. When you're thinking about goals, it's also important to think about what your personal goals are for individual team members and what your team goals are. They may not be the same. And so it's important early on to talk about that to make sure everybody's aligned. And that's important because the time commitment that goes into a team that wants to win global finals is very different than a team that just wants to have fun. And if everybody is not aligned to that goal and one kid wants to work every day after school and put tons of hours in, but the other teams are not, there's going to be some disappointed kids and you're going to have a hard time. So you want to think about what those goals are. You want to think about what your competitive goals are. You want to set milestone goals. Don't make everything just about your tournament. Maybe a goal is, we're going to pick a team challenge and that's a struggle for you. Make that a goal and celebrate when you complete that. Say, hey, you're really struggling on your technical element for the challenge. Make it a goal that you're going to figure that out by X date. And when you get there, you celebrate that. And when you're thinking about those goals, make sure that they're smart. They're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're realistic, and they're timely. So it's important to just kind of break this down and think about it. And then also make sure that the commitment and the time that your team is willing to put into this matches the attainability of your goal. Because if your kids don't want to take any work home, want to meet once a week for an hour and a half, that's very different than if your team is meeting 3 times a week and every Saturday of what they're just realistically going to be able to accomplish. And then check your goals as a team manager. You're not a team member in the same sense that your kids are, but you are absolutely an important part of that team. And your goals shouldn't be different than your kids' goals. If you are a super competitive person and want to push them towards that, but your kids are not and they don't care, it's going to be frustrating for you and it's going to be frustrating for your kids. So think about that and make sure that your goals are aligning with their goals and that you're all in that common understanding, because it's going to make your team season, your tournament season, go a lot smoother if you're all aligned. It is also incredibly important to understand where the points are and to help and understand scoring. So this is an example from the engineering challenge this year. Central Challenge makes up, this is not including the team choice elements, so 240 points. 67% of that is on the modular device. 33% is about the story. So if nobody on your team wants to build a modular device or spend any time there, you may be a little misaligned with your challenge and your scoring. So as a general rule, as you're planning, more time should be spent on the items and the elements that are worth more points. But it is also, if you're talking about WOW teams and WOW scores, really important to think about even those 10 points can make or break a team and make a huge difference. So I'm not going to break this down today. The training that I'm going to do in January, I encourage you all to come. It's Think Like an Appraiser, and we're going to talk a lot about scoring, and we're going to talk a lot about what that means. But this page here, you should be looking at this every team meeting. How are you doing to accomplish these goals? What is our WOW going to be? It might not be everything. You might just pick one WOW. Is it a character? Is it a team choice element? What's your WOW going to be? That's a really good place to start, right? Pick one thing. And how are we going to maximize those points in that area to really be WOW? So again, right? Getting your team to WOW, it's really important that you understand what you're after. So how does scoring work? Scores can either be objective based on whether a challenge requirement was or wasn't there. That's not the areas you're going to focus on to be a WOW team, right? It's did it happen? Did it not? You want to make sure you get there, you get it done, and move on, right? Objective points. Where your WOW and where your creative scores come in are those subjective scores. And that's based on the appraiser's opinion of how well or how creatively they feel your team fulfilled a challenge requirement. And now that's a little bit challenging, right? Because there's a risk, because everybody's WOW might be different. So we're going to share some rubrics and some things that you can use as a base to help your team try to achieve that WOW. And then there's also zero scores. The only time a zero is given in Destination Imagination is if something truly does not take place or does not happen or does not appear. Otherwise, if it exists, it's always going to get at least 1 point. But we're going to focus on those subjective scores. So another thing to keep in mind is that DI follows something called unified subjective scoring. All appraisers, when they give scores, score everything, at least in Central Challenge, on a scoring range of 1 to 30. And then the computer scales everything to make it worth the points that it's actually worth in the challenge. So when we look at these rubrics for Central Challenge, you're going to see everything out of a 1 to 30 scale. And that's also important because if something's worth 10 points, whatever the appraisers give is going to be divided by 3, essentially. And so when we train appraisers, we train them to use that entire range. But just like to level set that. So a few different kinds of rubrics. So I train our appraisers in Wisconsin DI. I'm a former International Challenge Master, have appraised for years. These are the same training slides and the same rubrics that the appraisers get. So full transparency there. This is just a really simple rubric. We tell our appraisers they don't have to use a rubric, but we want them to score the same way consistently. And we train them based on rubrics, especially when they're starting. After 20 years appraising, I'm going to be really honest. I don't need a rubric because I have it here, because I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of teams by this point. But this is something in Wisconsin DI we like to put on clipboards as a quick reference. So if you're looking at a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 5, minimal effort. 6 to 10, needs improvement. Satisfactory, 11 to 15. 16 to 20, average. That means they solved the challenge. If you did and met all of the scored requirements, that's not wow territory. That's solving the challenge, 50%. If you want to get to wow, you're looking at that 26 to 30 point range. And most appraisers give that out really rarely because they need to have that initial immediate wow reaction. So let's put some words to that. This is just another kind of way to look at this and break it down. What does wow mean? Creativity is there and it's innovative, right? That definition of creativity that we talked about. The wow factor, right? That's why we're doing this training. Appraisers are trained. If something makes them go wow, they're in that 24 to 30 range or 26 to 30 range, depending on which rubric they use. Unrelated elements are synthesized to create new ideas. That's that causing something to come into existence that we talked about, and it's solved by innovation. So I think if you start looking at the rubrics and you share these with your team members and share those definitions of creativity and what wow is, it helps kind of take some of that and break it down into how they can achieve that. This is an example of evaluating the creative use of materials. This 24 to 30, that's the wow range. Most materials are used in unusual ways. Many materials are used in combination, several more than once. Materials are integrated in humorous, unusual ways. Presentations are more exciting because of the creative use of materials, right? That's that gut emotional reaction, something that makes you pause, something that has expression, something that is being that the team is making their own. Another example of just words for rubrics, there aren't scores here, but that exceptional is the wow. You know, the team did an exceptional job with their improv. They used a feature and an exceptionally creative anim. It was integrated. Like they improvised extremely well with the elements. So this is an example of like if you're an improv team, right? Because we've talked a lot about stuff, but a wow doesn't just have to be physical, tangible objects. It can be, what did you do to have the appraisal team make that reaction for what you're doing and how you're incorporating things and doing things. Teamwork. What does wow teamwork look like? Every single time your kids go into Instant Challenge, they're going to be scored on teamwork. Your wow teamwork is leadership and team roles are easily identified. We're not talking about that tonight, but in the roadmap, there are team roles defined for Instant Challenge. I would definitely encourage you to go look at that. Diversity of skills is mutually respected and evident. Teamwork doesn't mean that all of your team members are doing the same thing at the same time and everybody is contributing the same way. Great teams know their skills and they divide and conquer. and they embrace that in their team solutions or an instant challenge, where they're able to lift each other up by working together and embracing those differences. And those team dynamics are exemplary. That's your performing stage. So that's where you want to get for teamwork. Team choice elements. To get a wow score on a team choice elements, you need to consider all three of these things. Appraisers are going to score all of these. And for my team, this was often what we made our wow. Like we came up with a wow that was a team choice element. That was just something really cool because we weren't limited by any factors in the challenge itself. So a team choice element can be anything that the team wants it to be that isn't already scored. It can be presented simultaneously with another element or as a standalone item. The idea of it, the appraisers need to be able to say, yep, this individual thing is the team choice element that we're being scored. And they're going to look at that for creativity and originality. So that's that novelty that comes into play, right? How creative is it? The definition of creativity, the quality, workmanship, or effort. How much time and effort did they put into it? Does it look like they just threw it together in a day? Or does it look like it's something that they spent months on? Because some of the wow factors that I've had too are the intricate details that teams do and come up with to make it be a wow. You know, I've seen teams make costumes out of spoons where they take individual plastic spoons and attach them to make costumes. There was a team a few years ago at Global Finals, actually a Wisconsin team, that used wine corks in gradient colors based on the color of the wine on the corks to create their background. Talk about wow. It was wow because it was clever and they used ideas, but it was also wow because of just how intricate and detailed and how much quality and workmanship was evident in that. So a wow doesn't just have to be those novel ideas. It can also be something that's really, really well done. And where we see a lot of teams lose points and leave points on the table to get a wow instant challenge score, or not instant challenge score, team choice element score, is that integration. The idea behind a team choice element is that the kids can have it be whatever they want. But it should feel that it's still part of that presentation. It shouldn't be just off to the side, or if it wasn't there. I like to think about it as if the team choice element wasn't there, how much would it matter? Would I miss it? The more I would miss it in the presentation as a whole, the more integrated it is. And as an exercise for your team, I think it's really fun when you're getting closer to the tournament and you're starting doing dress rehearsals to perform without a team choice element. How much of a hole does that mean and leave in your team presentation? Is not having that costume or that prop or that song or dance, does that need to be there for your entire presentation to make sense? Does it leave a hole? If it does, and the absence of that really matters, then you're probably doing really well with your integration. If you don't have that item in there and somebody watching it wouldn't know anything was missing if it wasn't there, then it's probably not very well integrated. So as a team manager, I would encourage you to play with that, to do that, to try it with your teams. Record it on your phone, have them or iPad, and have them watch it back and see what it is, right? You're not going to tell them if it mattered or not. You're going to have the kids perform and watch it and then see how much it was missing or how much it mattered. But it's not interference for you as a team manager to suggest that you do that or to facilitate that process from happening. What the kids do with that or how they determine if it was integrated or not is up to them, but you can help them understand what integration is in how to think about it as far as their team choice elements. Same goes with integration. If you're integrating any sort of other elements into a solution, this is just the example for team choice elements, because teams oftentimes just throw that part away and don't even think about it and leave those 10 points on the table. All right, I'm going to pause for questions.
A little bit of levity, of course.
All right, so how can you take some things that your kids are already doing and help push them to get something to wow, right? Oftentimes you reach a point and you said, okay, Chrissy, you taught us to push them beyond their natural limits, to push them a little bit further. How can we do that? This is an activity that I actually learned from a team manager. I do not remember her name, but she was a Texas team manager and she gave a workshop. I went to a conference for DI in Texas many years ago, but we did this activity and she called it Good, Better, Wow. And we actually walked through this and it was really fun and really impactful. And I think it's an easy thing for you to do with your teams. So what do? You split your team up. If you have 7, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, adjust if you don't into 3 groups. And you put good, better, or 2 groups. If you don't have 3, maybe you just split it in 2 and then you just rotate and then rotate back. But if you have 7, this is for that. You write good, better, and wow on the top of 3 pieces of paper and each team gets 3. Then you're going to walk through it and give each group 5 minutes to come up with a team choice element. We want them to, in those 5 minutes, sketch out, write down their ideas. What materials would you use to create that team choice element? How would it be constructed? Just think about how they would make up and build a team choice element. If we were in person, I'd be making you all do this yourselves. That's why we're going to have a little bit of time on hand, because if we were in an in-person session, we would be doing this. Once that 5 minutes has done, everybody puts the pens down, timer goes off, and you have your team rotate. You choose one team member to stay with each solution, and the other member or members moves to the next station in line. Then you're going to pull out that better piece of paper and give them 5 more minutes. This next team's job is to look at the original idea for the team choice element and see what they could do to make it better. They can't change the original idea completely. They can only make it better. Because remember, these aren't bad ideas. These are all good ideas that you started with. And you're going to list what additional materials you might need to accomplish it, anything that you need from the good idea list, you're going to move forward, and they're going to spend 5 minutes making this idea better. And then the last time, and keep in mind, you still had that one original team member, right? That had that idea and they were attached to that and they were a part of that original idea generation. This last time, everybody's going to move. You're going to move the member that was the next person in line. So none of those original members are part of that first rotation, right? Because then there's no holdout of ideas or anybody that's going to be like, nope, this is mine and this is what I want, right? And they're going to move to that next. And then you're going to give them 5 more minutes to take that original idea and the better and change it to make it go wow. So this is after you've already talked about your definitions of wow, talked about your scoring rubrics, walked them through and taught them all about creativity and wow. You want to get them working on this. And you can't change the idea completely, but you can only make the existing idea wow. You could also modify this and do this and take an existing element that your team has already made. So say they've already been working and come up with an idea for a team choice element. Rather than generating ideas, you could just start with better in 2 groups and rotate and go from better to wow, and that your existing idea is good. So that's a kind of a modification that you could take if you're already at that point. And then you're going to rotate back to the original groups and you're going to have them and review the good, better, wow sheets and present and discuss as a group. It's really fun to see where you started and where you went. We talked a lot about creativity as creating something and innovation as creating something, but many of the most novel and innovative ideas or things have evolved over time from a base idea. Let's think about this little thing, right? All of us have this phone. This is a combination. This started with your basic, phone on the wall, party lines. Then somebody innovated it so that everybody had their own line at home. Then somebody innovated it where, there was the cord on the wall. Somebody developed that to get rid of that cord and make a cordless phone. When those cordless phones came, that was wow, right? How awesome is it that we don't have to sit in the kitchen with that phone on the wall anymore with the 8-foot long stretched out cord? I am old enough to remember that. We had that one as a kid. Also the rotor dials we had. But when we transformed to the cordless phone, think about how innovative that was. And now think about, the 90s version of yourself. If you would have ever imagined that here is not just a phone that you can make phone calls on. You don't have to be in your house. It's also a computer. You can take pictures with it. It's your camera. This is development. It's taking a good idea and turning it into wow. So don't feel like you have to start with the wow. Your kids don't always start with the wow. They start with the good and make it the wow. So last tips, and I know we're early, but I know it's a Monday night and I want to leave time for questions and want everybody to have an opportunity to take some time back on their Monday night as well. Make sure you're solving the challenge. Make sure you know what you're doing. Know where your points are. Make sure that you take some time to assess ideas against the definitions of creativity and the definitions of wow, and see how they're stacking up to those things. And get used to brainstorming how you take ideas and make them better and wow. That's that job that you as a team manager can do by forcing your teams out of their comfort zone and not just stopping at good enough. And so that good, better, wow activity can be really useful there, especially when they're getting started. As they get better at it, they're just going to do it on their own. And think about that and how you can use scoring rubrics to help evaluate. The good, better, wow is also really great to use between tournaments. So you may go to your regional tournament with a good idea. And you're going to take your scores and see how you scored for those elements. And then take some time to reflect about how you make those things better for the next time. And then you take that and you make it even better for the next time to get it to wow. By the time my team got to globals, our stuff was wow. It wasn't wow all the time at a regional, because we learned how to push it and not stop, and how to add and how to constantly be improving between. I was a structure team, an engineering team. We tested a structure a day between state and global finals to keep improving. Minute. I'm talking like move this piece, move this brace, use this kind of glue, minute changes from day to day, just to make it that much better. So your wow teams are constantly looking for areas of improvement. They're not going to coast. They're going to keep pushing themselves, keep refining. That doesn't always mean you're just going to add more glitter or add one more thing. It could be changing it, but to really think about it. Or it could be you go to a regional and something doesn't score well because it just didn't resonate with the appraisers. And maybe you scrap it and start again. That's okay too. It's really, but use those definitions, use those rubrics. We'll share these out and just kind of reflect back, and you can help push your kids to wow. And even if that's not a wow on the rubrics, if it's a wow from where they started at the beginning of the season, as a team manager, celebrate that too, right? Because what's a wow for your kids might be very different than a wow for somebody else. So it doesn't just mean like wow in terms of you're getting a 30. So if you got any questions, this is my contact information. Like I said, I'm Chrissy Burr, volunteer, DI alum, appraiser, international challenge master, former, just DI lover in general. So if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to help work through this. We'll make sure we share out these slides after we're done, as well as a folder full of a ton of handouts and activities for team building, fluency builders, just things that I've put together and gathered throughout the year that we kind of just share with anybody that attends any trainings. So thank you and good luck. And then we'll pause here. And this will be recorded if you want to reference anything back or for those that didn't attend.